Global War Enthusiast here with a video about Maritime Air Patrol Interdiction of Submarines, carrier-based Maritime Air Patrol, and carrier-based map leapfrogging technique. So let's look at this situation here. The British player has 3 transports here in C-Zone 31. And with it carrying a total of 3 heavy tanks and 3 Marines. It's unguarded. Let's assume there's no technology that's developed, no advanced anti-submarine warfare. So these transports are defenseless. They have no retaliatory attack. The Germans here have a major port in Normandy, and so these subs have a base movement of 3, but with that major port they have a movement of 4. So even just one submarine could go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would be instant victory for the Germans. All that material would be destroyed. So let's say that the British bring in the second fleet, and they put it into C-Zone 24 here. Well, the way submarines work, they can just decline combat here. They can just move the same 4 spaces and destroy the helpless transports. This is why Maritime Air Patrol is so important. The British could fly this seaplane from Northern Ireland. Seaplanes have a Maritime Air Patrol range of 1, 2, and get here. Or they could fly, say, this tactical bomber to C-Zone 24 and go on Maritime Air Patrol. Let's say they use the tactical bomber. What's important to understand is if you're going to use MAP to interdict the movement of submarines, you're going to be in the defensive player's role. And that means that you'll have the defending die rolls instead of the attacking die rolls. So a seaplane attacks on a 3, and a tactical bomber attacks on a 7, but a seaplane defends on only a 1, whereas the tactical bomber's defense roll is much higher at a 5. So if the Germans decide, you know what, we're still going to send all 4 of these submarines into C-Zone 24 here, then what would happen is it would be the British player, the German player first has to announce their intention. Are they going to go on a convoy raid here? Are they going to try to blockade this port here? Actually, I don't think subs can blockade, never mind. But are they going to try to move through so that they can get through this sea zone and hit the transports over there in C-Zone 31? So the German player announces, I want to move through. Now, the British player, since they have Maritime Air Patrol, they can stop that, and they can say, they make a decision. I can either engage the submarines, or I can allow them to go through. But the British player definitely doesn't want that to happen, so the British player announces that they're going to force these submarines into a naval attack. And if you remember from the previous video, one of the ways to kill submarines is to have them attack your fleet. That's what this Maritime Air Patrol interdiction is doing. It's saying, hey, you have to fight me. You can't move on. We're gonna have combat. So if you think about this, it's the German player's turn, and so the German player is the attacker, and the British player is the defender. And the way that works is after the German player has completed all of his combat movement, the British player now decides if there's any fighters or jets that are at air bases adjacent that he wants to scramble into the attack. And let's say this British fighter elects to scramble into that sea zone. It's adjacent, it's at an air base, so it joins the fight. So now we would fight this out. We're on the battle board. We set up all our units, and the German player, as the attacking player, has to decide first if he wants to submerge any of his submarines or attack with any of them if you think about the way it works in the reverse, when, say, the British player is hunting submarines, let's say the British player hunts with a tactical bomber and a destroyer and gets a hit on a submarine. Well, the submarine has no incentive then to submerge. It would choose to fight back and roll one die before it got destroyed. But in this situation, the German player doesn't have the luxury of seeing what rolls the British player had, and the German player has to decide whether to engage and fight with the submarines or whether to submerge. Let's say, for this hypothetical fight, that the German player is dreaming that they're going to destroy all these boats, and it decides to engage in combat. So on the attack, each of the advanced submarines has an attack of 4, and the regular submarine has an attack of 3. So what I've done is I've taken various colored dice, and I've painted, I always select white-faced dice, and then I happen to follow the Roy G. Biv. Red is 1 or a 2, orange is 1, 2, or 3, yellow is up to 4, green is 5, blue is 6, etc. So we have 3 yellow dice, so that's 3 at 4, and 1 at 3 for the Germans. So here's the Germans' roll. They got 1 hit. Okay, so then it's the British player's turn, and the British player has 2 heavy cruisers, those hit at 6, plus this fighter that's scrambling in also hits at 6, and it has 2 light cruisers, those hit at 5, and that's the greens, plus this tactical bomber on the defense, it defends at 5, and 2 destroyers, and those guys are at 4. So this is what the German player is facing with their submarines, and you can see they got 3 hits. So the German player chooses to lose the 1 basic submarine and then 2 advanced submarines. And so I think you can see how this is going to play out. If a submarine player is facing Maritime Air Patrol, they definitely want to avoid going into sea zones like this, because they're going to have to face the entire opposing fleet. That Maritime Air Patrol can basically help the other ships pounce on the submarines. It's a devastating situation for them, so they really want to try to avoid running into planes like that. So let's look at a slightly different situation, or a different way of providing Maritime Air Patrol other than just flying out, because remember our range. Here are the 5 units that can fly MAP. You can have your seaplane, and that has the advantage of a range of 2, but it's very weak. Attacks at 3, defends at 1. Or you could have a medium bomber that has a range of 1 unless you have long-range aircraft, and then it has a range of 2. It attacks at 7 and only defends at 4. And then the next best map option is tactical air. That attacks at 7 and defends at 5. And then the next best one is fighters. Attacks at 6, defends at 6. And then the very best thing for Maritime Air Patrol are jets. They attack at 8 and defend at 8. Basically, these 4 have a Maritime Air Patrol range of 1. This guy gets upgraded to 2 if he has long-range aircraft. Okay, so now let's pull this land-based Maritime Air Patrol option off and put on a carrier as an option. Okay, so let's say that this force is sitting here. Let's neglect those. Get rid of that hypothetical situation. Okay, so the submarines are going to tend to, in my experience, they're going to tend to avoid going into a sea zone like this one that has Maritime Air Patrol already in effect. The way it works with carriers is that the carrier can choose at any time that these planes are patrolling the sea. I mean, it just makes sense. Any carrier commander worth his or her salt would have a certain proportion of planes patrolling the sea around the carrier, making sure that there aren't any submarines around. So it's not going to be typical that a submarine's going to go into this sea zone because immediately this plane is going to say, yep, I'm interdicting you, now you have to face the fleet. So usually a submarine will move somewhere else and attack a different convoy line. So what can happen is then on the British player's turn, they can fly a range of 1 from the carrier on Maritime Air Patrol. They could go like this. Now they could fly more if they wanted to go and attack Normandy. They could fly their normal range. But if they're going after submarines like this, then they can only fly 1 off the carrier. And if something happens to that carrier and they can't, in this case it could fly back here if it had 1 more range. But let me go to a different analogy. Let's say that this fleet is in Sea Zone 22. Well, this fighter could not fly and hit this sub, or it could not fly and hit that sub because it's a range of 2, okay? Let's say it goes here and is attacking a submarine that's in Sea Zone 23. That is allowed, but if something were to happen to this carrier, if this carrier were sunk in some other action, then this fighter only has a Maritime Air Patrol range of 1 to get back home. So don't let that happen to you, because you might be thinking, oh, yeah, I've only used 1 of the fighter's range. I've got a lot more. I can make it back to land. But you have to think about all the fuel that you're consuming flying that grid pattern like we talked about. So Maritime Air Patrol range for a fighter is only 1. So this is carrier-based Maritime Air Patrol, very effective. But there's a technique called leapfrogging that I want to talk to you about. And what that is you cannot have this carrier here. Some people think that what you could do is to move this carrier 1, 2, 3, and then have this fighter go after those submarines on Maritime Air Patrol, because now it's a range of 1. The reason you can't do that is because to move that carrier, it was moving in non-combat movement. It's not engaging in combat when it's doing this. Yes, this fighter is engaging in combat, but the carrier would have to stay back here. And so what that means is that the best you could do, you could fly your fighter here, but the leapfrogging technique is that, let's say you flew your fighter here and attacked a submarine using Maritime Air Patrol. You killed it. Then the carrier could move to here and this plane could land. Okay, so in a way, your fighter, it was always following its range of 1, but it used it to advance. So that's the leapfrog technique. So I hope this has helped your understanding. I learned a lot making this video. I really appreciate None Shall Pass and Trigg's help, and shout out to Mark the Shark who gave me this idea for this video. Thanks for watching.